So I'm going to create a series of quick tutorials that are intended to help the students in the class bring their models into Max for Sketch Exercise 1. So we're going to talk about normals, we're going to talk about materials a little bit, we're going to talk about making a daylight system, and I'm going to break that up into a few components. The first thing we're going to look at is going to be how we deal with the fact that sometimes our normals and our surfaces aren't facing the right direction. So in this model I imported, I've got a building and a site and some trees. And when the site was created, I have a feeling that some of the normals aren't facing the right direction. So I want to check that and see what's happening. Now, it looks to me in the viewport like everything is good. But I'm going to make a quick test rendering to see what happens. We'll see Mental Ray open up. You can see that I've already rendered it once before, so I can already see where it's going to go. But as it renders, the black background is showing through a bunch of the street and some of the sidewalk surfaces, even though when I look at it in the preview, I can't see that, but I do see that at render time. And we talked in class about this. You can do a couple of things. One, you can use a two-sided material, which isn't always the best solution, and we'll talk about that more in class as to why not balancing the light appropriately is a problem. But if we have time and we have the knowledge, we can flip these surfaces rather efficiently. The first thing we need to know is how to figure out how to get in here and turn the default system off so that we can actually see the normals that aren't facing us. I'm going to select that street area there, and I'm going to right click anywhere in the window to get my quad properties or my quad menus, quick menus, and I'm going to turn on the object properties. And I'm going to notice that it's set to by layer by default, and everything is grayed out, which doesn't make sense to me. I want to mess with this object that I've selected, so I tell it to let me do things by object. And notice we have a choice whether or not to turn on backface cool. If I go by object and turn on backface cool and tell it OK, we can see that some of these areas have turned a different color, which indicates that we're seeing this grayscale background behind it. Let's do the same thing with the sidewalk. I'll select the sidewalk, and then I'll right click to get the quick quad menus and go to the object properties again. And I'll notice that as soon as I tell it to go by object and have backface call on, we can see again that we've got a bunch of holes in our surfaces. So we need to figure out how we can fix that. What I like to do is isolate one of the selections. So since I have this selected, I'm going to right click and I'm going to go up to the freeze the selection. I don't want that. I want to hide the unselected items. So now I've got everything hidden but my sidewalk. It helps me work. I'm also not going to mess my camera up, so I'm going to right click on that. I'm going to change it to an orthographic view so that I can spin it around and not screw up my camera. But we can see that it's kind of showing me that some of them are facing the right direction and some of them, the other ones, are facing the wrong direction. So I'm going to focus from the back side here because I want to be able to select the surfaces that need to be flipped. So I'm going to go into the Modify tab, and you notice that I've got the layer, which was 3D SM Sidewalk, selected, and everything's kind of just not really, there's no mesh there, there's been no modifiers added, not a whole lot has been done with this. It came just like this into CAD, but I'm going to go into what's called sub-object selection right here. It says selection here, but I want you to think about what sub-object selection means. This is the object. It came into CAD and it grouped itself together because it was on one layer into a 3D object. And I can select that object, and it's selected right now. I hid the other objects that weren't selected, and now I'm looking only at the selected item or object. But sub-object selection are some other options we have. Like we can select components of that once we've gotten into it and had it selected and isolated. I can select the vertexes, I can select the edges, I can select the triangular faces, I can select polygons, which are triangular faces that are all together, and I can select a full element if they say it's a box or a component. I'm going to go to polygon. Notice that it yellows the editable mesh, and I'm in sub-object selection, and I can start to click and highlight some of the polygons or faces that are facing the wrong way. I'm going to hold down the control button so I can make multiple selection, and I'm going to pick as many of these as I can without kind of losing my thought and my concentration. I don't try to go for all of them because I'll end up messing my selection up. But once I get a handful of them selected, it looks like that might be a good time to go ahead and then do something with that selection. So I'll go down in here and I'll find the normals on the surface properties, and I'll just flip the selected items. And notice that they disappear. Now they're facing the other direction. And as soon as I click in here and unselect, then you can see that I can get in closer and I can do the same thing. So I'll just select some of these surfaces. I'm not going to do all of them for the purposes of this video. I could code for a while, but I'm going to select somebody, and that one kind of highlighted funny, so something's going on there. But I'll select these guys and flip them. And as you can see now, when I turn this thing back over, those are actually facing up. So it seems like there's a little piece here I selected, so I can go back to select, pick the ones that, and hold the control down, and there must be a duplicate face there. So it's not always easy to get everybody, but you can go through and pick the things that are facing the wrong way and flip them, and then flip yourself back over and see what's going on. Now you can't really use a crossing window, right? Because if you did that, you'd be picking both the up and down ones, and there's no way to flip all those together. So you've kind of got to go in and strategically pick the things that are facing the wrong way. I like to look at it from the bottom side, so it helps me see which ones they are, and just in segments, pick them and flip them. Now, obviously, you may decide if this is a lot of work that you want to go ahead and try to be a little bit more careful about making your normals face the right way, or you might just give up and use a two-sided material, which is fine for the purposes of what we're doing. But I want you to know when you need to flip your normals, how to go into sub-object selection. The only last item is that you've got to actually get out of sub-object selection. Know that I've got the editable mesh is still yellow, and I'm still in sub-object selection. And if I forgot about that, and I unhid all of the other objects, and I wanted to pick something else, it kind of doesn't know what to do with that, because it can't change the selection as long as I'm in sub-object selection of the sidewalk. So I've got to get out of sub-object selection, and then I can start to pick other items. But you got to remember to get out of sub-object selection. So I do the same thing for the street. Once I was done with that, I would go ahead and hide the unselected items, look at it from below, and come into sub-object selection and pick some of these faces and pick them all, really, actually, or most of them, flip them, and you kind of get the idea. Now I'm starting to flip these guys back. I will get out of sub-object selection. You always got to remember to get out and hide the unselected or unhide all, and now we can see that some of those were fixed, but not all of them. So that's how you actually flip the normals, and I'll go ahead and stop the video, and we'll go into the next one about actually starting to introduce the daylight system.